Welcome back, everyone. We're getting some fantastic responses to the petrol price increase that is coming into effect at midnight on Tuesday. It's not a good time for South Africans at all. In fact, we should brace ourselves for yet another fuel increase. And this time, it's going to be a record increase. We're looking at the Department of Energy announcing yesterday that both grades of petrol, 93 and 95, will increase by 26 and 23 cents a litre respectively. Diesel will increase by 26 cents a litre. Despite this increase, the Automobile Association says the increase could have actually been worse. But joining us on the line now is Layton Beard. He's the spokesperson for the Automobile Association. Layton, good to have you. Thanks very, very much for chatting to us.
Good morning, Leanne. Always good to be with you.
You know, I mean, we're still coming back from a massive increase from June, 82 cents a litre, around about there. So, I mean, it's been tough for South Africans, it really is. Talk to us about a statement coming from the AA saying that the fuel increase could have actually been worse than what it's going to be on Wednesday.
Yeah, it certainly hasn't been an easy time, and it hasn't been an easy time for all South African consumers, not only for motorists, because we know that a lot of people make use of public transport, and this is also going to affect them. So there's two factors that influence the fuel price, and the first is the Rand-US dollar exchange rate, and we've seen that, for instance, now going into July, the weakness of the Rand has had a huge impact on the fuel price, and it is driving the increase of 26 cents that we are seeing. But the other factor that contributes to the fuel price is the international price of petroleum. Going into July for the whole of June, the international petroleum price was relatively stable. In fact, it came down at some points throughout the month. But had that price not come down and kind of gone up instead, this increase of 26 cents could have been a lot worse than what we are going to experience on Wednesday. So oil really did play its part in helping reduce the fuel price, but unfortunately any gains that international petroleum gave us was wiped out by the weakness of the Rand against the US dollar.
Yeah. You know, if we look at factors that influence our petrol price, and I mean, you've spoken about the currency and the oil price, are those the only two factors? I mean, is there anything else that we can attribute to these increases?
Yeah, look, I think it's very important that the public understands that the fuel price is made up of different components. Now, obviously, we have the basic fuel price, and there's all types of margins that are then added to that, and you've got to think about storage costs and transport costs and all of this type of thing. But a very significant part of every litre of petrol that people pay for goes towards indirect taxes. So if we're looking at a petrol price of 15 Rand 80, which is now going to be the price of 93 unleaded inland, 5 Rand 30 of that petrol litre, of that price that you're paying, is paid towards indirect taxes in the form of the general fuel levy, which constitutes 3 Rand 37, and the road accident fund, which constitutes 1 Rand 93. So 5 Rand 30 of every litre of petrol goes towards indirect taxes, and I think it's very important that people understand that the price that they're paying at the pump is not only for fuel, but also includes these taxes. And when you speak about things that make up the fuel price, that obviously is quite a significant amount that contributes to the price that we will be paying at the pumps.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to talk a little bit about the road accident fund now, because I think we saw some awful reports coming out over the weekend where a contract for the rental of 300 chairs at almost 500,000 Rand a month. I mean, this is ridiculous. Follows a bid to push through an even more audacious 5-year, 60 million Rand furniture rental contract with the same company. I mean, the Road Accident Fund gets 1 Rand 93 cents from every single litre of petrol sold by you and I, or to you and I beg your pardon. You know, this is crazy. I mean, this must infuriate you as much as it infuriates me.
Look, I think what's happening at the moment, Leanne, is that a lot of people are looking at these indirect taxes that we are paying, and they are saying, are we getting bang for buck from these taxes? They constitute quite a significant portion of the litre of petrol that we pay. So if we, for instance, look at a 50-litre tank of petrol at 2 Rand or 1 Rand 93 a litre, we are paying quite a lot in taxes. So are we really getting out what we are putting in terms of the payment of that tax? And obviously for the Automobile Association, when it comes to increasing increasing these levies, we would prefer to see that when an increase to them is made, which is done normally every year around about April, that they are in line with inflation. At the moment, they are not in line with inflation. And I think when we see stories that come out about how money is spent, and I have to add the caveat that we haven't, as the AA, read the report on which the article is based, so I don't want to go too deeply into that until we've actually applied our minds to it. But what I can tell you is that people certainly will be questioning whether there is value in the taxes that they are paying on a litre of petrol.
But I want to talk a little bit about the Road Accident Fund, because I think it's only fair, and I'll leave you to look deeper into the story and the report that came out in the Sunday Times yesterday with regard to these chair rentals, which is just insane. I don't understand it. But, you know, I speak to so many people that have got claims with the Road Accident Fund, and they have had them for year after year after year, and they get absolutely nothing out of the Road Accident Fund. I mean, what are they doing in terms of helping South Africans? You know, is it fair that we're paying this much money towards the Road Accident Fund? And I will repeat it, R1.93 per litre of petrol that we pay goes to the Road Accident Fund, and yet people are struggling to get a cent out of them.
Yeah, I think it's been a perennial problem with the RAF, and I think a lot of people have in the past, complained about the service they received. Having said that, there are a number of people who have also said that the service they received has been excellent. So I think it's very important that you balance and see exactly, what is the situation on each and every basis. And I wouldn't want to comment too much on whether the RAF is doing its job and what they're doing with that money. I think that's a question that they need to answer. But certainly, I think there are a lot of people who are concerned that their claims are not being dealt with efficiently. And like I said, a lot of people are beginning to question whether there is value for money in paying this R1.93 per litre of petrol.
Yeah, really is, and especially when you're giving this money to an insolvent company, and a report stating that the RAF lost 34.7 billion rand last year. It's very, very tough, and I think we need to bring the Road Accident Fund in and talk to them. We really, really do. Getting back to increases, Layton, do you think from the way things are looking now that we can actually expect an even greater petrol price by the end of this year? I mean, let's actually not go as far as the end of the year. Looking at next month, I mean, are we expecting another increase coming our way?
No, you're trying to make me more unpopular than I am already. But I think when we look at the rand-US dollar exchange rate specifically, the exchange rate is basically used on an average. And so when we look at the average for June, it averaged out at around 13.30. Now, we've seen that the rand has lost a lot of ground against the greenback in specifically the last couple of days and perhaps the last week and a half. If that trend continues and the rand continues to weaken against the US dollar, and unless the oil price really does play along and comes down quite a lot, we will most probably see another increase going from July into August. It may not be a huge increase, it may be 10 cents or 15 cents, but I think, psychologically, when you've crossed the threshold of 16 rand a litre for one grade of fuel, it makes a big difference if that does go up by 10 cents. So I think the outlook initially, and this is something that will obviously change based on data that comes through every day, but from our vantage point right now, if the rand continues to weaken, then I think we could see another increase going into August. How big that increase may be, I'm not sure, but it may be an increase nonetheless. If
we have to compare ourselves to the rest of the world, or let's even bring it closer to home, the rest of the continent, how do we stack up? I mean, I've got a graph at looking at some of the most expensive countries in the world and how much they pay, and equivalent to us. And I think Iceland tops the list. They're sitting at about 27 rand a litre, and then the bottom of that top 10 is Portugal at 23 rand 50 a litre, and we breaking through the 16 rand mark. The rest of the continent, I mean, how are we faring?
Look, I mean, there's obviously countries on the continent that pay a lot less for their fuel than South Africa. You look at a country like Nigeria, they're paying, around 12 rand a litre. We look at places in the SADC region, Botswana, Namibia pays around 11 rand, 12 rand a litre for their fuel. And the reason they're obviously paying less than what we are paying is this whole issue of the taxes. So if we were to take the 5 rand 30 of the 15 rand 80 for 93, for instance, we'd be looking at a price of around 10 rand 30, which would make us very competitively priced compared to other countries, not only in SADC, but in Africa as well. we are not the most expensive in terms of fuel. And as you've mentioned, countries like Iceland and Norway and those, some Scandinavian countries, Greece, for instance, are also paying around 25 Rand a litre. There are countries that are paying a lot for their fuel. But we're also not the bottom where some countries are paying 2 or 3 Rand a litre for fuel. We're kind of really in the middle. But I think this issue of the taxes is something that we believe needs to be relooked at. And I think once that has been reconsidered and perhaps the increases have been reconsidered in line with inflation, I think that would make a lot of South Africans feel a lot more comfortable about the price they pay.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I'm looking at the top 10 cheapest countries. Venezuela pays 11 cents a litre of petrol. I can't believe what I'm seeing here. Iran, 3 Rand 57. Egypt, 4 Rand 64. Nigeria, 5 Rand 27. And then Syria in the top 10 of the cheapest prices, 5 Rand 50. I'm going to throw a little bit of a spanner in the works. It was quite interesting reading yesterday some people talking about the fact of, we're so slow on the uptake of electric cars. And, petrol is just getting more and more expensive. And there's so much politics that goes with petrol. And we know that. I mean, we've got sanctions with Iran, and that, of course, has a big effect on us as well when it comes to the price of crude oil and all of these issues. And yet, at the end of the day, we're so close to electric cars and almost doing away with petrol and fuel-run cars. Talk to me about that. I mean, how is that going to change the face of transport and the way things work?
No, it's certainly going to change it in a very big way, but I think we must temper that argument with a bit of realism. We're sitting with 12 million cars in South Africa on our roads at the moment. Now, if we were to replace every single one of those vehicles with an electric vehicle, it would take a very, very long time. So it's not something that is going to happen overnight. When we talk about electric vehicles, we have to understand that there is a payoff, and that payoff is time. The other thing is that to create electricity itself is a consumer of fuel, and we're talking about fossil fuels. So, to create the electricity that is going to run these electric vehicles will also require a certain infrastructure that is going to back up the demand for that electricity for those vehicles. So it's not, in our opinion, the silver bullet. Certainly it is an important development and one that we need to take cognizance of. But let's not forget that electricity doesn't just appear out of thin air. I think South Africans are well aware of that fact. And to create the electricity to actually meet the demand for those vehicles is in itself another discussion that will require quite a lot of in-depth thought. And also, as I said, Leanne, it's not going to happen overnight. If we were to replace all the vehicles in the country with electric vehicles, it would take a very, very long time indeed.
All right, Layton, we leave it there for this morning. Thank you so very, very much for talking to us here on the program. But we're looking into the future. But unfortunately, if we have to come back to the present, petrol does go up, and it goes up on Wednesday. And it's going to be a very, very tough time for South Africans. Layton Beard from the Automobile Association talking to us about this latest increase, the 5th for South Africans this year.